So next up, we're going to check out Dazrat. StarCraft vs. Warhammer 40k is not as one-sided as you think. Part 1, the TERRAN overview. While I know a good bit about 40k, I don't really know much about StarCraft other than it was made by a company who was trying to do what I've been told was either a prequel to 40k, but later heard other people say no, it was actually fantasy, in which case that makes even less sense to me. It was supposed to be Warcraft instead of StarCraft, but details aside, it's all Blizzard either way down, and I think GW dodged a bullet on that one, for now, until Microsoft buys them. Just throwing it out there. And that means I know very little about this other than the basic themes of giant mech power armor, which admittedly is really damn cool. I don't really know what we're getting into here other than what we saw so far, and that was, there's a lot of, yeah, we're the space rednecks who have all the guns, and it works. And surprisingly, armor meant not for protection, but for being able to hold the, oh god, what the fuck guns that make the protection more about utility because it is not going to be enough. So it's more gun first, armor as a way to hold gun, as opposed to 40k where armor is how you survive, and then you can also hold guns anyways. So this is more offensive with armor, where 40k is armor with offensive. It's a small difference, but an important one. Beyond that, though, there's a lot more here I don't know, and I'm actually really curious to find out. So let's jump into it.
To affect things up to the size of a Lehman Russ tank.
Dude.
On this fun piece of tech that likely exists in 40k, but probably is far rarer to encounter, unless you're a Necron, Eldar, or an Orc at the peak of Mech Boy Summer.
That sounds amazing.
Since they are the main faction used for comparison, for obvious
Mech Boy
reasons,
Summer in general.
I'm going to do a hard pivot
Knights?
into the things in which the Terrans are just flat out better than the Imperium in.
What?
As a start, let's have a look at 3 vehicle types that are basically mirrors of each other.
Oh, wait. StarCraft has giant knight-sized walkers? I was unaware of that. That's so cool.
In one corner, we have the Honorable Imperial Guard Sentinel, and in the other...
Honorable. That's a phrase. I always thought they were death traps intentionally because it's like, we have enough of you. We don't need to worry about you coming back.
It's roided up interdimensional cousin.
I'll be completely honest here. If someone had shown me this, I'm like, oh, knockoff Mad Cat. It looks like Battletech, man. I'm not the only one seeing that, right?
The Goliath Combat Walker. On average,
I mean,
the two
cool,
come at about the same height, and the Sentinel...
And I just realized it has a dick gun. Double-barreled, it seems, on either side. It's actually a dick gun.
has a wider variety of armaments, but in my opinion, the Goliath's more min-maxed frame serves the purpose of a support vehicle to infantry much better.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't have attachments as punchy as a las cannon, or any melee options like the Sentinel chainsword, but it doesn't need those to do it.
The Sentinel has a chainsword? Okay. Sure.
Its job, which is to fill the air with enough ordnance for enemy infantry, light vehicles, and aircraft to drastically reconsider being in the same area code as it. A
Yep.
task sublimely fulfilled by a fixed loadout of 2 to 3 autocannons and
No, never mind. It is single-barreled. They just got one attachment hanging down below the crotch.
twin shoulder-mounted scatter missile racks, all of which are able to effectively track and fire down multiple targets independently from one another thanks to its powerful targeting array systems, turning it into an armored pillbox and an anti-air battery, with more...
It really does look more like Battletech, I'll be completely honest. Almost to the point of if Battletech... At the time period where this came out, Battletech was fighting all the lawsuits because of the unseen, so they were probably not looking to sue someone for taking their IP when they were being sued for, admittedly, someone, an artist, just selling the same idea twice across the ocean when no one knew that yet. Yeah, that would do it.
reinforced plating
They probably
than
just
the
didn't have it.
average
It's too late
armored
now.
Sentinel, that can also run as fast as a car over any kind of terrain. Additionally, while the Sentinel cockpit features controls similar to those
Ewoks.
in Star Wars AT-STs, the mode of control of the Goliath is a more advanced version of the one used by the mechs in Avatar, where the pilot is strapped into a cradle that allows the machine to mimic its movements. Some
You know, they just say 1 Euro helmet away, and this is literally just Battletech. I'm surprisingly stuck on that right now, but it's literally just Battletech.
commands of which can also be vocally activated and acted upon by its onboard computing. This allows it to be more maneuverable and reactive, especially on the micro scale, for the purpose of dodging, taking cover, repositioning, and so on. And, as a treat, it is...
And according to Pylo, it's basically a pocket Mad Cat. Yeah, I can see it. It definitely looks more like someone decided to make a Locust, but with the Mad Cat aesthetic, and it worked out pretty well. It looks good. Also, if they're going over rough terrain, it seems like this Dick machine gun might be knocked off.
Also equipped with gravity accelerators that allow it to operate in zero-gravity conditions, as well as special systems aiding in the mech getting up on its own in cases where it's been knocked down.
Huh, useful.
Following up comes
also
the
a lot of
ever-venerable Leman Russ battle tank, facing off against its would-be rival, the Crucio siege tank.
I do think they're... While at the same time, these are one-to-one comparisons of basic tank to basic tank, I think there is something missing here. A lot of 40k stuff... It's not as good as 40k can get. So, how to put this? It's like the baseline for 40k when it comes to the army, especially when it comes to the 40k Imperial Guard, is it's good enough, and if we have a lot of them, it's even better. So you're never actually, dear fucking God, Duck! I'm sorry. I just had a fear reaction. Like, I think my arms just got, like, actually goosebumps for a second there. And it crashed chat. I'm not the only one blue screening at the moment. I'll think of a rec later for this one. In before you tell me to refund. Let's just say I make a salary in the ballpark of 6 digits. That helps, but dear God, man, at the same time, I don't mind if you hold down. Fucking A. As long as you can afford it, though, man. And please don't push past that point. Oh. Yeah, I just got a cold sweat off that. Holy shit. I was saying earlier I had blue screen at 5,000 as a joke, and apparently it would be a lot lower number. Oh. Fucking A. And yeah, Duck, when you come up with a comment, make sure also people badger me about it because I'm easily distracted because goddamn. YouTube limits you? I didn't even know they did that. Good, actually. Fuck, sorry. I just lost my entire train of thought. Okay, no, I remember where I was at. But yeah, as soon as you come up with one, let me know. God damn. Essentially what I was saying is, in terms of deployment, keep in mind, you could take squads of Leman Russ, where I think this tank is probably something you'd probably also take in squads, but it's meant for apocalypse scale battles in the terms of 40k. So, functionally, this is not the comparison I think you would need. To get the same tonnage, it would probably be closer to a Baneblade to this thing, but then I think StarCraft probably has bigger things than this, because I think they actually scale up quite a bit bigger in the game. I only know that from various screenshots where I saw some really huge things, but they had to move on because my PC couldn't run it. Yeah. So I was like, let's not look too much. Oh, God damn. But yeah, in general, one is definitely looking a lot more chunky than the other, but I think only one might be a disservice comparison-wise.
At a glance, they seem to basically be the same, both coming at about 60 tons. And if anything, the Leman Russ might pull ahead due to having a greater arsenal variety.
Wait. They're both 60 tons. How the hell is this 60 tons? No, I'm actually pulling up that. This is an example of the people have no idea what weight looks like. Like, there's a lot of franchises where numbers are thrown out because they sound cool, but when you actually get down to the brass tacks of it, it is not there. What weighs 60 tons? Yeah, sure. Let's go images. 60 tons. Oh, this is 40 to 100 tons. 60 tons. 60 tons. 60 tons. 60 tons. Okay, yeah. That might not be 60 tons. A whale can be up to 58 tons. UK or US is 65. Oh, they have different tons between UK and US. I actually didn't know that. That looks a bit heavier than a semi-truck. That is not... This isn't a case of the number they threw out is just a big number because big number big. Not because they actually thought it out. That is not 60 tons, man. And people are just saying better material science? Entirely possible, yeah. And the same excuse that Battletech does to say a giant mech is 100 tons. When you really think about it, that is just a semi in weight when they stand above them and step on things that big all the time. Battletech, when it comes to weight, when you really think about it, is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Tank. At a glance, they seem to basically be the same,
60 tons,
both coming
ass.
at about 60 tons. And if anything, the Lehman Russ might pull ahead due to having a greater arsenal variety and sporting both sponsons and additional hull-mounted armaments, while the Crucio only sports twin plasma cannons on its...
To be fair, that does look really cool, and those are giant fuck-off guns.
turret. Editor's note, yes, in-game the siege tank and some other units' weapons don't really look like what you'd expect their lore outfit to be.
Yeah. It's like it's a video game where you can't actually have things the correct size. For the same reason, when you think about how big the Imperial vehicles are, they are scaled down at a lower level than the models for the various human-sized units, explicitly. Also, Battletech tonnage is actually mass and not weight. Remember that myomers that make up the majority of the musculature are extremely low density. Yes, except when they're talking about drop, they're using tonnage as weight to justify why they can't do something bigger, because anything bigger would be too heavy to take off with, except then it's one of those things that's hand-wavium that people came up with smart answers for, but in general, it's big number big and the 100's fine. You just look the other way because it's science fiction. It's not hard science. You don't need to worry about that much, and it doesn't really take away from the setting. So it's like, it's fine. But that one is stretching it a bit. 60 tons my ass.
Because, regrettably, Blizzard is very bad at correctly depicting the weapons from the lore. Resuming.
Yeah.
So just with the twin plasma cannons on...
Oh, it's a turret, yeah, because it actually does have things that stick out to do this. Now, this might sound... Oh, here. I'm out of the way. Like this part right here where the arm comes out.
Correctly depicting the weapons from
Wait
the
for it.
lore. Resuming. So just with the twin plasma cannons on its turret, that makes...
This is actually something that looks super sci-fi. The foot coming out and sticking down, and that's like, oh, there's no way that's real. That's a very common technology now with cranes. They have feet that fold out. This is actually incredibly well thought. In fact, it's over-engineered for something we have now and is very normal. I just find it funny that they went all the way out to do something incredibly sci-fi looking for the equivalent of, yeah, we have this on tow trucks sometimes. We have this on cranes. It's very normal. Spread the distribution points down to make it more stable. But yeah, it's kind of normal. Also, I'm being told there was a mod someone mentioned. Ooh. Here it goes. And Harkin mentioned a full armored vehicle division, you mean? No, someone made the comment, I already lost it in the chat. Oh no, here it is. Have I seen the mod for StarCraft where everything is lore size? Turk, I haven't, and that sounds amazing. I haven't played StarCraft because I'm terrible at micromanaging games like that. Absolutely terrible at them. I have some games for it. They look cool. I just never play them because I'm really bad at them. But I would love to see what the actual scales would look like. That would be so cool.
Makes it more equivalent to a Heresy-era Executioner Russ.
Yeah.
However, due to its less archaic design, its hefty armor plating would be more effective at resisting punishment, and its tracks are less likely to be hindered by terrain.
Also, just the thing I point out every time we bring up the state of the Imperium, keep in mind, the Imperium in the Crusade is already post-apocalyptic, using the remains of the grand civilization that came before it. They are not working with the high end of sci-fi tech. They are working with the trash they could scrabble together from the people who only remember enough to know that this is good, we don't know why, and might have the unbeatable laser defense shield that they don't know they need to turn on. Or how some of them have STCs inside of ships. Perfectly set up AIs running them and just hate the crew, but not enough to destroy it. So this is probably more advantage to StarCraft because they actually know their tech. So they could use it well. Where 40K might have access to it. 30K might have access to it. But they don't know they have access to it. Because again, we're not comparing the height of civilization to the height of civilization. We're comparing StarCraft at the height of a redneck civilization that knows their stuff versus, admittedly, the equivalent of saying Fallout New Vegas if Mr. House didn't exist. It's that level of, oh, we're dealing with everyone who's just scrabbling together after the end, after another end, after another end. It's multiple apocalypses of degradation of technology. I know I went on a big rant about this before in the first part. I'm going to do it again. 40K tech sucks compared to 40K prior to that. 20K kicks their ass. And that is a thing I'm never going to stop harping on because I love how it makes the setting so much more disturbing when you realize this is not the pinnacle.
This is thanks to its multi-track configuration with 2 extra tracks for added stability, enhanced by a series of tubes in the chassis and the bogies of the tank, which pump a fast-drying gel onto damaged sections of the tracks, which replaces the lost tread segments upon hardening.
Oddly enough, this sounds very fantastic, of a gel that hardens the place to replace broken pieces, and for a track, yeah, that's sci-fi. But in wheels, that already exists. Like, there are self-sealing puncture wounds in cars already, and they're part of safety-mandated production for new tires. This is pretty close to an actual current real life. This actually exists. People think it's sci-fi because they don't realize they're already using it. Also, it's kind of how 40K would lose technology, because you don't realize the stuff you're already using, because this is actually a thing that exists. Not for tracks, but for tires. Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Extending its operational life beyond damage that would be crippling to other tracked vehicles. And the thick hydraulic outriggers, or legs, from its sides that can help push it out of binds. Oh, and this tiny little thing called Siege Mode, where the turret forgoes the 2 plasma cannons as it rearranges itself and transforms into the Crucio's shock cannon, a 180mm proper vehicle-mounted railgun, which fires superheated tungsten in a wide area, or different shell variants, like armor piercing for example, turning the tank into an artillery piece.
As much as that looks like a cool shot, this is a personal thing. You have walls. They're not flying. You're standing in front of the wall. Siege works best if you have the advantage behind you that you use. I've seen this in a lot of anime. I've seen it in a lot of TV shows. Just think of Lord of the Rings if they decided to fight the Battle of Helm's Deep outside of Helm's Deep before retreating into it. If you have walls to fall back to and you're already outnumbered, fall back to them. Sorry, it's a stupid thing. Walls don't really matter when you have an aerial battle because they can just shoot you behind it. But if there is no air problem, it's no air problem. And it didn't look like they had an air problem there. Now, I do know Zerg Rush involves that, but they weren't doing that yet in the video.
One that happened to be a pinch too destructive to friendly forces as well. Yeah. That was until Lars Corp developed a smart shell capable of scanning for allied signatures and adjusting its detonation so that the friendly fire was minimized.
Still existing, but 75% reduction in fatalities. Honestly, that's probably doable now if you had the technology put into a shell. The downside to that is, why would you put that much info into a shell? It's just not feasible, because if you want to hit someone, you don't want to, wait. But also, most artillery is such long range, you shouldn't be able to see what's shooting it. It just doesn't make for a good video that way.
A project that has had an astonishing 75% success rate.
Also, Croc, these were apartment buildings in Zerg can fly? Oh, okay, that makes better sense. They're probably better defended than the walls then. And Zerg can fly? Oh, yeah, no, I know that one. Even I know about the Zerg Rush. And Valerian is pretty cool. Hell yeah! Also, I do know full well that missiles right now have the absurd technology put into them to the point where they're more expensive than most people's houses, cars, life insurance policies, and everything they've ever bought in their entire existence. Yeah, I'm aware of that. But at the same time, it's really, really not good. It's why the militaries are actually looking into cheaper options like railguns, which apparently Japan just managed to successfully do, and laser weapons, which, surprisingly, kind of work pretty well if you have an absurd amount of power to do it, like a nuclear weapon or a nuclear powered battery, like most ships have when they're newer. Not all of them, some are still diesel for the smaller ones, but functionally, yeah, it's just a matter of output at that point because you don't have any storage of explosive ordnance. So they're actually a lot safer for that reason, because if you're already on a nuclear powered vessel, you're already protecting that thing as much as you can, which is fun because I don't like the usage of weapons, but I think some of the crazy shit people come up to are really cool.
Variety is the spice of life, but I'd say this increased mobility and being able to switch between an executioner and
that
a
guy got an
railgun
ad?
basilisk takes the cake in this case. And in the final round, we'll go big, comparing the imposingly majestic god machines, the Titans, against the bringers of thunder and lightning, the Thors.
It looks like Battletech. And for that reason, I think it's really cool. It's a giant fuck-off mech, man. I don't care who wins on this one. I love it either way. Sorry. When you scale up to giant mechs, I love this stuff. I absolutely love this stuff. But it looks like Battletech, and that's why it's awesome. Also, convergent design. It's basically just humanoid variation and giant cannons on the back. I am wondering, though, is he going to be talking about knights as in Warhound? Knights as in, you know, the warlords? Or are we talking Imperator? Because Imperators are absolutely broken. Like, they are insane. They are essentially walking cities of fuck you. We are going to destroy everything on that coordinate map. It's not a city is destroyed. An Imperator is this section of a state no longer exists if they fire all out. It's terribly represented in the game, but in the lore, it's the essential thing of, unless you have plot rights and are a Primarch, don't.
However, to narrow it down, the Thors hit peaks of 30 to 33 meters in height, which puts them at the same size as Warlord Titans,
reasonably
the
good,
second biggest breed of Titan after the Imperator.
Although the Imperator, I should also mention, doesn't have standardized sizing because they are all unique. Well, technically, all Knights and Titans are unique because that's kind of how when you get to that size it is. But Imperators specifically are the upper end of what the upper end looks like. And that's if you don't get into side Titans, which, admittedly, most of 40k should not even know about. Because that's a level of, oh god, you need blanks and a psyker to run it at the same time in close proximity? Yeah.
Now, I know the exact size of Titans in the lore is contested, due to a bunch of...
Also because there's different places making them at different specifications without realizing the different specification. Oh, I cannot speak today. Specifications, there we go. So, yeah.
Conflicting sources. But the diagrams found in the rulebooks of
War
the
Master
Titanicus game are the currently accepted official sizes.
Yep. And admittedly, they all look cool. The Warlord looks cool. The Warbringer looks cool. The Reaver is actually usable. The Warhound is fun. And the Questorus Knight is functionally stronger than most of them on the Battletop. And Sturk, I wonder if there are any Psi Knights? Oh, yeah, there are. You can actually find them in the game. They've added them to the Titanicus one. I don't know how good they are, but in the lore, they are the equivalent of, okay, we have a beam of non-existence as the standard weapon. Not unexistence, not it's been destroyed. It's more like whatever we hit doesn't have existed. But I think they also have multiple riders who have touched it at different times not do it that way, so maybe it's just the one rider who did it.
For which the parity of Warlords and Thors stands. If you don't like that, bring it up with GW. I'm just presenting the information.
And then there's the explicit times where multiple people have explicitly been wrong on the estimates, because they can. Yeah. Duck, what scale is that blueprint? Bad. I don't actually know how big it's supposed to be, but in general, a Warhound is a little taller than a Questorus Knight, but it's chunkier. So it's probably very adjusted. And Phantom, it's not just a psyker, it's multiple cybernetically bound alpha grade psykers. For clarification, the only thing stronger than an alpha grade is Omega, and that is the Emperor. Yeah. And I think the pilot itself is specifically a null. It's why they can deal with being around multiple alpha grades.
Anyway, back to big stompy mechs. Durability-wise...
Also, Valerian, was the non-existence gun a unique thing? Maybe. Because there was also supposed to be only a handful of the Psi Arcana mechs. We got lag. But they had their own issues. And I think it was one of those things like where they mentioned there was a ship that was one of a kind, could destroy planets. And then there was 3 more of them. We don't talk about them.
The hull of the Thor would not equal that of a Warlord, since it lacks adamantium. It still offers great protection, being made from a composite of neosteel and ceramics.
Admittedly, ceramics is really good at dissipating heat, so against the higher-end weapons, it actually might be better. Seriously, there's a reason the shuttle has ceramic on the outside. They're very good at dissipating heat.
Designed to resist high explosive armor-piercing rounds and powerful energy weapons.
Yeah.
Additionally, its external armor is modular, making it very easy to maintain, replace, or enhance, given the battlefield circumstances.
But the big advantage to a upper end like an Imperial Knight, sorry, not Knight, a Titan, is the Void Shield, because those are giant fuck-offs. If they have the power to keep it up, you're fucked. On the tabletop, it's not that good, but in lore, it definitely is.
And the machine itself is fairly recoverable, since if its hull remains intact, its built-in Immortality Protocol, developed by the arms manufacturer ATVX,
Immortality Protocol?
allows the Thor to repair itself in the field back to functionality.
Oh, that's just bullshit. So essentially, we're looking at the mismatch of custom-made, incredibly specific, almost irreplaceable ancient relics of absurd power on 40k side versus, yeah, it can take a few hits, but that'll fix itself later. We can go again in next week, which is a level of replaceability that is essentially almost unbeatable because functionally any outcome here that doesn't end with the Imperium of Man bending over backwards to get these guys on side like they did the Mechanicus is probably functionally incorrect, because mechs that heal themselves and are not AI because there's a pilot is the equivalent of saying, please sir, we will do anything you want, join us. Would they do that in 40k? It's entirely possible depending on what Inquisitor finds them, or for Rabuti Gilliman. 30k? The Emperor would make concessions if they were willing to get on board in a heartbeat, because self-healing mechs that you can just slap better armor on and add shields to, and then they still heal themselves is, oh yeah, no, he will give you anything. Levels of begging, and completely justified.
When it comes to bringing down the thunder, it is no slouch either.
Yep.
For this, the choice of hammer comes in the form of 2 giant particle accelerator cannons on each arm.
Oh, Hell's Reach,
4,
I remember this.
Dealing destructive death well within the weight class of Warlord weaponry.
Yeah.
Further aided by chest-mounted javelin fragmentation.
Also, this isn't a Warlord Titan we're looking at right now. This is an orc giant fuck-off stompa. I mean, it's not a stompa, whatever.
Missile pods, where we're talking fragmentation meant to shred enemy aircraft, and a
here we go. Here comes the Titan.
250mm anti-aircraft cannons, or 330 barrage cannons, or in short, shit that is liable to gun down void ships, as it is basically miniature Ordinatus.
Yep.
For non-40k viewers, an Ordinatus refers to a weapon too large to be borne by any kind of walker, sometimes including armaments normally mounted on void ships, who have...
In other words, if you need to pay attention to how much it weighs, by being on planet, it weighs too much. And they have them. Yeah. And also, Phantom, you mentioned the multiple side ties is actually pretty funny. I'm just going to pull up your comment. Pretty funny. The Ordo Sinister originally were described as having 12 Imperators and just deciding down on the planets to threaten them with a threat of 12 Titans. Later, they added the side Titans is one of, or single one, then tied to Ordo Sinister, implying part of the group, and they made 20 of them. The numbers in 40k are always a little weird. In 30k, there's a lot of things where you look, it's like, wait, so this was a battle in space versus Gilliman that lasted 30 minutes because it went from one end of the solar system to the other, but then later in the same book, in the same series with the same With a different author, though, we'll be like, okay, so this is also, hey, Gilliman again, at the same time period, he should be on the other side of the galaxy fighting this battle right here, because we're reading this from the heretic side. And they're talking about how it was a 3-month affair fighting at a sublight speed from one end of the solar system to the other. Or it's maybe like a month long or a week long. You see what I'm talking about here? When it comes to specifics, don't ask questions because they will always be wrong intentionally and unintentionally. You just roll with it as the author provides it.
A ground platform built exclusively for them.
Yep.
One of the most infamous examples of which is Oberon, a presumed Nova cannon adapted for planetary surface function, used in the book Hell's Reach to vaporize an orc gargant, which...
To give credit, though, this is not a Titan. This is a giant treads attached to a gun that no one should be able to hold. It doesn't have a spinning turret, which is what a tank would have. It just moves to point at the right direction.
Was almost bigger than and slew the Imperator Titan Storm Herald.
Yeah.
The reason I called the Thor's back mount...
Yeah. And it did slew an Imperator. Granted, the Imperator went down swinging on that one.
Arrays miniature ordinatus isn't just because the walker can carry them, but because StarCraft ships are notably smaller than those of 40k.
Oh, really?
But we'll get to that later.
I actually don't know anything about their ships whatsoever, so this is all going to be brand new to me.
Regardless, even with this well-earned glazing, in a one-on-one scenario, a Thor will near certainly lose to a Warlord Titan. Among its weapon profiles, the Emperor's God Machine can field horrors too lethal for the Thunder God to withstand, while its own hull is made of stronger materials, and the biggest difference maker, the Thor's lack of shields, whereas a Warlord bears its panoply of Void Shield generators.
Although I would say they do have one advantage. If they could steal tech because they're willing to do that, slap a Void Shield on this thing and... I mean, that is a lot of durability. They could probably power it a lot easier because they know how to use power better. Maybe.
Plating alone would not be able to hold out long enough for the TERRAN mech to breach.
Although I will admit, this looks so freaking cool. Like, look at this and tell me that's not the coolest thing ever, man. Because you'd be lying if you were saying that. Because it is very much the coolest thing ever. It has the design aesthetic of giant fuck-off heavy guns, and it looks so good.
Said shields, and then punch through the Titan. Yet, I still think that what the Dominion engineers have produced is the superior of the Martians.
Yeah.
Based on 2 factors. Firstly,
heals self. That is why I went on that entire little tangent earlier about how if this was in 40k, it would be immediately begged for. Not taken. I mean, they would love to take it too. But if you can do it yourself, show that it's a human-made design, and then show how it's something that I, as a human, have made this, and it looks like a person, General State Bar is like, oh, we just made a better knight. Yeah, I could also see an internal civil war happening in the Mechanicus because it's technology they don't control, and that is the one thing they never actually allow. There's a lot of instances in 40k novels, not the vandalization. Vandalization? I'm actually not sure that word now that I think about it. I've only read it. Where people are talking bad about 40k, but a lot of the times, what people jokingly say is what an Inquisitor would do is like, destroy planet, they fucked around, they made a mistake, is actually a lot of what the Mechanicus does do. Yeah, there's a lot of factional politics where people are like, I'm going to let you destroy yourself and everyone else in this entire sector because I don't like you because you got in my way. Yeah. But for anyone else, they would love everything about StarCraft.
While Titans require an integrated pilot to just move, alongside a...
Also, I'm saying Mechanicus because I'm thinking 30k right now. It would be it's Mechanicus and 40k, Mechanicum, and I got them mixed up. Am I even having it backwards right now? I don't even know anymore.
Additional crew to monitor and control the remaining systems and weapons, a Thor only requires a single pilot in order to bring its full capacity to bear.
Yep.
So the specialized personnel required to get one running, and which would be lost if one is destroyed, is far less crippling.
Although partially that's because 40k doesn't understand its own tech, and it probably wasn't designed that way, it's just how it works. And Vlad, you mentioned the word was Flanderization. Okay, that's the word. Got it. Thank you. And it is Mechanicus in 40k, Mechanicum in 30k. Got it. Gracias.
Secondly, and in my opinion more importantly, the time it takes for a Thor Walker to be manufactured is on par with the same time it takes to construct an Imperial Knight Walker.
That's a very odd comparison because how long it takes to make a knight very heavily depends on who's doing it, where it's being made, what are the processes in 40K, and how much bastardization is going into it due to loss of technology, because a lot of it is very much balkanized into very specific locations, and if anything is ever lost, it's just lost. So that number could be anywhere from, okay, we can make one every month to one every day if you have a really adept factory, to we can make one a decade. And if you're talking about anything larger, they might have actually lost the capability. At this point, they can only repair it. It really does depend on who you're talking about. So that is a very wide range. I'm not entirely sure it's as effective as a comparison as it should be.
Even if a Thor was just equal to 60% of a warlord, like with the Marine comparison, even though it's realistically closer to 80%, but whatever, being able to produce that in such a short span of time versus
Looks
that of a full
cool,
Titan
though.
of the same weight class.
Also, I just like to point out the other mechs down by its feet, and it looks like they're actually before the feet as well. They're just huge, man.
The former is still vastly more cost-effective.
Yeah.
You can even apply this to the infantry. Being able to train and equip the low-balled 60% of an Astartes in the same time frame the Imperium trains and equips one guardsman.
Okay, that is a much more useful time, because the amount of time they train one's guardsman might actually be the equivalent of, you know where to shoot correctly? If you survive long enough, we'll tell you how to do more than that. To, we're actually going to make sure you know what you're doing. You're going to survive. Yeah. It's still better than Helldivers. Oh, bringing this one up. One, thank you very much. Two, and Nirvan, you mentioned, fun fact, the Terran is made of flying Titan equivalent, the Archangel, which is a Viking upscale to size of a Thor. Oh, that is so cool. I will fully admit, though, while I do love 40K stuff, the sheer unbridled riz, oh god, I hate saying that word, of the StarCraft Ultra Mechs, like the size scale and like the way they look, it is so cool. Oh, also, I think we're literally just one away from meeting the goal. I mean, I'll let it roll over if we miss it, but don't worry about it. Oh, and we already got it. Thank you very much, Pylo. The Thor prototype was even more insane. The Odin was bigger and was essentially a whole army by itself. Terrans and Zerg together barely beat it. Oh, so it was eventually probably corrupted and taken over by them, so they had to fight together. Yeah, because they do have a lot of teammates, because unlike the Tyranids, the Zerg are not mindless. They're mostly mindless. Although I think functionally a lot of what 40K is doing is leading into the hive mind being similar to what the Zerg already are portrayed as. Personal opinion, I could be wrong. And also, it'll probably be like another deck before they get to that, because they're probably going to release most of the Primarchs before that happens. And they did have, like in the previous edition, one of the final books of it was how all the Primarchs will return in a vision. Or a vision of all the Primarchs returning. Yeah. I do mean all. Not the living ones, not the demon ones, all. Which means Ghost Sanguinius, which we actually know is already a thing because it has come up in multiple books in the Horus Heresy and later. So, yeah, that's actually the easiest one to do. And considering since the Great Rift opened, undead are actually a thing, so Ghost Legion would be interesting. Ferrus Manus, who we have seen after he died as a ghost with the Emperor. I think in a one-shot where it was maybe him, but it was like entirely decided. I never really got into that book. I just know he kind of maybe appeared later alongside the Emperor as a maybe ghost, holding the portal closed on the other side. And Horus. Yeah. Now, if it's going to be Horus, it's going to be a clone of Horus that maybe gets a bit of a soul that wasn't corrupted, because the big change, I'm about to say things that probably count as spoilers. If you are any way, shape, or form going to read The End of the Death or the Horus Heresy, don't listen for like the next 5 minutes. If you're still here, I'm assuming you're okay with this. The initial lore for the fight was the Emperor destroyed and erased Horus' soul so Chaos can never take it. That is not what happened when they got to the End of the Death. When they got to that point and they put it down into writing to cover what happened in the Horus Heresy, he had his soul shattered into multiple pieces and flung away. He is dead, but his soul is only shattered. It still exists. So theoretically, you could get all of the pieces back, and then you get Horus back, which may or may not put him at the risk of being taken over by Chaos again. Personally, I think if they did that, they would probably do Horus redeemed, and then one of the loyalists going traitor to keep it even as 1-to-1. Or who knows? Maybe they just go, oh, by the way, Omegon and Alpha Airier are back, and they're explicitly declaring who's Chaos and who's loyalist the entire time. If anything, I think they'd probably go traitor Raven Guard aspect of Korix, because they've kind of mentioned he's turned himself into a demon Primarch from all his time in the warp. How much of that is actually going to turn out to be real when he comes back? Who knows? But he's probably the most likely to go traitor because of his exposure. Yeah. Either that or Rust, because no one knows what's going on there. But yeah, if you don't care about spoilers, we're good. You can come back now.
Surely you've picked up on it by now. Efficiency and tactical flexibility.
Yep.
Born from the fact that the Terrans are just better at adapting. Honestly, comparing the ability of research and development between them and the Imperium is like comparing that of the Skaven and the Dwarfs from
Yeah, except in this case, the rats are probably the better at adaptability, I hate to say it. If they ever stopped shooting themselves in the foot, head, neck, weapon that explodes, they'd probably win.
Fantasy. One is lightning fast, while the other is glacial. And this still stands even if you factor in that the Mechanicus predominantly relies on adopting newly rediscovered tech.
Yeah, but also innovation is a bad word. Adaptability, not so much, because it means it already exists. And the people who could do it are great, but there's also a lot of infighting of who has the best designs, and you want to have the purity of design from your Forge world, and only certain Forge worlds are allowed to have certain designs, so it's very much limited. So you might actually be cut off from certain things unless you make a specific agreement with this Forge world to have it, and if this Forge world falls for any reason, it might just be lost because only they had the right to have it, and it's not actually stored anywhere else, and... The more you find out about 40k, the more you realize the Mechanicus suck. And that if the 40k heresy didn't happen, if the Horus heresy didn't happen, I don't think the Emperor would have thrown away the Space Marines. I think he would have sent them to destroy the Mechanicus. Because he would want all the power, and they are just a waiting time bomb. Which is also being reflected in some of the things that are happening, talking about another civil war in the Imperium, tearing the Mechanicus from the Imperium itself. Sort of a spoiler there too. Sorry, I didn't even think to say that.
Than developing new ones due to their dogma. As a similar example, the medical nanites and laser sutures used by medics. Prior to the UED invasion of the Caprulu sector, that technology did not exist there, and neither did the combat medics clad in CMC armor.
Yeah. Crazy thing is, though, depending on who you're listening to, this does exist in 40k. Some of the descriptions of apothecaries have this explicitly. Some. Because depending on who's writing it, they might say different things. And also, it's one of those things where a bolt gun and a las gun might be completely different weapons, except for when a las gun is actually a solid-state projectile that you actually have to put ammo packs into to use. Because that is the thing that happens, because the word is used more commonly than it is actually meant to be. Because that was also a thing in 40k where words don't always mean the same thing depending on who's writing them and what system it's in, which is actually an intentional incorrect statement that in-universe people don't realize is incorrect.
But within months of their arrival in the sector, the technology was reverse-engineered and adapted for general army use by the Dominion. Then, in a mere 4 years, this revolutionary technology in the field of medicine was not only spread around all of the nations in the sector, but it was developed to the point where it could be used on ground troops in the middle of active combat, coming down from a dropship flying and or hovering overhead. It would take decades at minimum for the Mechanicus to work through their dogma and adapt something like that.
Yep. And Kerrigan looking mostly human. Her storyline was... Even I know her storyline. I will say, though, 40k does have a lot of the good tech already. They just don't know it because they're not looking into it. If they got someone to look into their tech from any other side, they'd be like, how are you not killing us already? Because they realize they already have the great stuff and they're not using it right. Also, Martin, wait, there's las guns where always laser guns? Yes. Some of their auto guns are called las guns because in the writing they're described as using power packs. Others are solar. Others are actually described as plasma because it's actually transferring slower than a laser and has physical mass to it, which is actually a plasma gun, but it's described as a las gun. And then others are actually described as solid state shells that they put in there and just fire really fast. And they call it a las gun because that's just the standard pattern, even if it's not. That's a thing that exists in 40K. Depending on the writer, depending on the location, depending on the culture of the place in there, it might fit close enough to the template that even if it's not actually the same thing, they'll call it the same thing. And that's actually something I actually like about the setting because it shows that there's a lot of cultural drift between various locations where they might be saying the same words and meaning completely different outcomes, and they don't know that, which is part of the internal humor, and I do actually love it.
Grav, communication, and terraforming technology are three other fields where the humans of StarCraft exceed those of 40K. Best exemplified with the following. Dropships that usually fit up to 10 people in them, having the ability to transport Thors. Imagine a Thunderhawk carrying a Warlord Titan.
I am, and I love the thought of it.
An even better example, orbital drop pods that accelerate themselves for speedy deployment. Except, unlike those of Warhammer, these ones are capable of transporting regular people and vehicles like siege tanks, likely by creating an anti-gravity pocket within themselves in order to protect their payload from G-forces.
The thing is, while they don't have that technology on grav pods, or drop pods, mostly because they only use them on people who wouldn't need it to worry about in the first place, anti-grav technology does exist in 40K. That's actually a thing. They have gravity weapons. They have gravity plating. They have this. They just don't use it because that's not in the pattern, so they don't think to use it. They haven't improvised it yet. Now, someone could improvise it to work together, but that gets dangerously close to innovation, which is heresy and will get you killed by the religious Martian fanatics. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Go ask Mordian Glory how it would feel to be able to deep strike a Russ on the board.
Is that
Average Imperial Guard player.
a death strike in my trials or my place to see?
Meanwhile,
Also, I do remember deep striking Baneblades, so yeah, that is a thing. You could have deep striked everything in a few editions. There was a lot of, oh god, why is all the guns on my side now? Yeah.
when it comes to connection, they have engineered technology that lets them have near crystal clear video feed between two ships that are light years apart, on top of other means of communication.
And they're probably doing it by entanglement, which is a technology that does exist in 40K, but it's incredibly rare, no longer understood, and explicitly, it does exist currently within the Sol system. The technology does exist in 40K, they're just not using it because they don't understand how to fix it. So they can only make sure it works well enough, but they can't replace it. They can't make more. It's also prohibitively expensive on their end because the technology is heavily controlled. Yeah.
While, with the lattermost mentioned kind of tech, they kind of cheat. Instead of actually going through the tedium of terraforming like the Mechanicus do with their geoengine megastructures that filter the air and change the climate, followed by the prolonged directing of habitation units tailored to the environment, the Terrans just find some planet that they want to explore, exploit, and or settle, and then, to quote Subsorian, just slap an atmosphere on it and call it a day. Literally, they have atmosphere generators that can create large radiuses of habitability based on their size and the amount of power put into them that work on planets with any kind of or no atmosphere at all, as seen in the book Firstborn.
That's actually ridiculous. Like, in terms of crazy sci-fi tech, I was already talking about how the Imperium, not the Mechanics, would bend over backwards for the self-healing mechs that you could reproduce fast on. Easy terraforming is probably something that would actively get the High Lords, unironically, to say, Mechanicus, we don't need you anymore. Because this is, think of all the dead worlds that they could immediately just fix quickly. That is a level of, yeah, we're good with this, that takes, it redefines 40K in a way of, oh shit, we can actually fix this. That is absurd. It is legitimately absurd.
And they are fairly common devices found in use by all of the Caprula nations.
Yep.
Again, innovation
That's
and
no
efficiency,
moon.
spawned by grueling necessity, curiosity, ingenuity, and the unstoppable might of the military-industrial complex, presented in the face of corporations that strive to follow the footsteps of Lockheed Martin.
And that's probably the downside to it right there. Oh, God. Also, I'm looking at the plan in the background. It's a construction. Girders to the core. Yeah, and also considering how big those girders would be. God damn, man.
A couple of which we've already
art,
referenced. And the reason for this specific difference is very easy to realize when you overlap the timelines of the two settings.
Oh?
The Terrans are the humanity who grow to achieve the golden age of technology, while the Imperium maintains its authority with their hand-me-downs, and the best the Emperor could make before Horace had his bitch fit.
And even that is less the best the Emperor could make, because there were a lot of technologies he could have improved on. Hell, honestly, the more you read of 40K, the more you read of his perspective, you're not getting the Emperor progressing humanity or the Emperor making the best of humanity. It's more what looks like the Emperor doing good enough by his standards that it won't fall apart immediately and moving on to the next thing because something is happening. And it feels like there's another shoe about to drop the more you read about it. Because in 40K, you think the 40K is the, oh God, we're recovering from the heresy, but it's horrible and terrible. And it's always war. And then you learn about 30K. It's like, oh, they were hopeful and it was great. And then Horus. But then you learn a little more. It's like, oh no, Horus Heresy was a footnote before the Iron Revolt or the Iron Rebellion, which was the Men of Iron turning against them. And then came Old Knight, which was the psychic bullshit of the pre-Slanesh universe where everything was cut off because those were actually separate things. Because a lot of the places that could have handled all of that bullshit happening with the warp being fucked up were destroyed by the Men of Iron. And it gets even crazier when you realize everything the Emperor does looks less and less like I'm going to recover humanity and more, oh shit, we need to get this done now. What the fuck, man? Grasping at straws in desperation. And I do mean desperation. The more you see from his perspective, the more it looks like a man who could do better and more with more time, trying his best to get as much as he can done now before something happens. And we still don't know what that something is. It could be chaos, but it kind of doesn't look like that because it's like he knew that would happen, but he was already planning around them. But it feels like there is still something coming that he knew about that is not being talked about because he's getting more and more desperate in ways that the enemies we do know about don't quite justify. Now, that's mostly my speculation, but it does feel like that every single time. And yeah, I think he's working on the assumption that it was StarCraft was supposed to be the prequel to 40K. And I've been hearing it's actually that Warcraft was supposed to be the prequel to Fantasy for GW, but apparently didn't turn out that way. Granted, I don't know the source of either one of those. I've only heard the rumors, so I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them turned out to be wrong entirely. And either way, GW decided to dodge that one. And Alex, or AK Zealot, maybe the Nids, maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. And there's a lot of different things. It could be chaos. It could be something else. I don't know. But it does kind of look that way because the Emperor makes a lot more sense when you realize this is a person trying everything with absolute and utter desperation. And if he went slower, a lot of his things would work well. Don't know. Oh, and Pylo, or the Rangden, or the Beast. The thing is, he slowed down right after the orcs at Ulanor, which became Armageddon, slowed or was beaten. So maybe it was. Maybe it's the Rangden. Maybe not. I don't know, because technically they're still around. I so desperately am looking forward to them pulling on that thread to see what happens in 40K. But if they do, it'll be like the Inari. We'll find it out 20 years later, and they'll only touch on it for maybe a couple books and then move on because it doesn't really make them money. But they're not going to drop the thread. They'll just hold it for later when they can try again. Because they do that. And a lot of things that don't get touched on in decades will be pulled up on a later book. They don't throw ideas away. They just wait absurdly long times to do it again. And Stark, maybe Big E just had bad vibes. And that's the thing. That is entirely possible because he was a psyker. If there's bad vibes, he cannot explicitly narrow down. That's probably more terrifying than know someone's going to shoot you in the face tomorrow and planning around it. I don't know.
In that light, when it comes to tech that is better in StarCraft than in 40k, we will unpin that note from the beginning and talk more about resocialization. Messing with the minds of others to the point where you gain control over them and can remake the person as you see fit.
Damn.
Even to the point where you can make someone kill a loved one without a second thought. The Imperium, or hell, most of the other factions, are no strangers to this, as they practice mind meddling in one form or another. Well, I'd argue that the Terrans are better at it than them, except
They're probably better than most people in 40k, if only because 40k is brutal in its efficiency. They're not trying to be subtle. They're not trying to be good. They're trying to be, okay, is it easier to kill you than mind wipe you? Bullet it is!
exception being the Necrons, because with just their technology, they managed to achieve something beyond what the subjects of the Golden Throne have, even when they use psychic means. Like the Tyranids, the Zerg of StarCraft operate as a hive mind, and when separated from it, devolve into mindless beasts. Here to the fore, I bring you the Cerberus Project, where Dominion scientists, who eventually split off into their own faction, managed to develop a way to control Zerg in an organized hive mind fashion, and essentially began to grow their own personal brood. To equal this feat, someone...
Oh, that's terrifying. Although I think the big thing is, we don't know enough about how Tyranids work in 40k intentionally to do that there. And that's one of the better parts, because I think the more you know about them, the more likely someone might just make them underwhelming without realizing it, which is kind of how the Hive Fleets feel. They're more terrifying when you realize the Hive Fleets are literally the equivalent of nothing. They're nothing, because the actual force is around the entire galaxy, just closing in slowly.
in 40k would need to tame a Hive Fleet tendril and grow it on his own terms. The closest anyone in the 41st millennium has come to this, to my knowledge, was a warband of Iron Warriors who injected a single Tyranid ship with the Obliterator virus, which broke the creature's mind, allowing them to steer it as a floating living factory that grew weapons and munitions for them. Actually, I just remembered, the StarCraft humans outdid themselves in this regard already, since the UED, again using just technology and drugs, managed to tame the newly growing Overmind, thus putting the majority of the Zerg swarm under their thumb. Following this, I'd like to bring up the story where the Tau captured an Astartes and tried to probe his mind, but he consciously forced his body to die, taking the scientists that were trying to breach his thoughts with him. From the examples we went over...
I did not know Astartes could do that. Mostly because I thought their entire thing was stay alive! But, yeah. Huh. Also, how embarrassing is it to be caught by the Tau? Damn.
Earlier in the video, I believe you, dear viewers, would concede that in the case of encountering each other, the Terrans would be far more adept at adopting 40k technology than vice versa.
Yeah. And the first reaction they probably have is, I'm sorry, you got what? You're just ignoring? Because the thing is, 40k, like I've been ranting about, they have a lot of this crazy shit already. They're just either not looking into it because it's not my job, or because someone is not allowing you to, because that's innovation. But they have a lot of it already, they just don't know they have it.
But with these last few ones, if they were to get their hands on a Space Marine, which, given that the bloody Tau did it, is very much so not
Yeah. Granted, Space Marine is a lot less impressive than if they got their hand on Custody. That would be impressive. Or if they're going full on, if the Grey Knights were actually based on the Emperor. But I think that's kind of falling out of lore because they're just not impressive enough for it. Yeah, that would be different. Like, can you imagine at 40k if someone randomly got access to the genome of the Custodes and maybe a clone of the Emperor's DNA, and it's like, hey, you'd be really sad if that was a guy named Fabulous Bill who did that recently and has been touched on in multiple books. Yeah. They're not dropping that plot line, unlike a lot of other ones. It keeps coming up here and there. over multiple years. They're slowly building it. So, yeah.
Likely, or nearly any other kind of valuable asset, they'd have the know-how with which to get him to reconsider his loyalties, so to say. With that tasty train of thought available to ponder, let us continue. Most of the ground pounders have had their time in the spotlight, but now it's time to look at the ones that move them from ground to ground, so they can get to pounding.
Ships.
The void ships.
I'm going to cut this one here because I want to save the next part as the finishing touch of this to go right into the giant spaceships, because I know I am going to geek out so much about this. Oh, it's going to be good. Yeah. Also, Marty mentioned Bile got Fulgrim, not Big E. No, I think he got a lot of them. He got specifically at the end of one of the books, Custodes. And depending on if the Custodes were based on Big E or not, I don't know. But I think he might have got a hold of Grey Knight as well, which, how much of that is Big E is, I think that is going down in real life option, because they're just de-emphasizing the Grey Knights as the people who have the genetics of the Emperor to people who specialize in killing demons are incredibly secretive because of it becoming less secretive because everyone now is finding out because of the Great Rift. Yeah, that's a thing. So it's probably not Big E. It's more they got Grey Knight and Custodes. I'm not even sure the Grey Knight one, but I know for a fact it was Custodes genetics, which may or may not be related to the Emperor, depending on who's writing. Ooh, hit the mic. Yeah. I like this, but for right now, we're going to save the next part when we get into the ships for later, because I'm going to geek out on that, and I don't want to cut that short. So we'll save that for the next part. In the meantime, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. It's pretty awesome. I love just finding out more about an entire setting I just don't know nearly enough about. And the freaking mech designs are so cool. I have a type, and this is awesome. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.